for students, because I think back to some teachers that I saw in the past or see currently, and like they'll be like really ripping into a kid in the hallway, and they'll be like, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you, and that's just like so culturally insensitive to some of these kids,
Right.
And I think it's important for us as educators to constantly be aware of like things that are going on, and like going back that one size doesn't fit all, and I'm pretty passionate about this restorative justice and these reparations, and getting teachers at times to admit they were wrong in a given situation, and be able to sit down and have a conversation in a peace circle with a kid.
Yeah.
Or be able to, we were having conversations about some of these students that, this one that we were having a conversation about is a sophomore in high school.
Right.
And the kid can't function in a school setting. So the school's driving him out to an alternative school. So I constantly think, I know a lot of teachers will be, well, great, good riddance. We don't need that kid in our school. But what got that kid to that point?
Yeah.
It's
tricky too, because I wasn't there the first year. I don't know everything that went on. Like I can try to like ask around and look back, things like that. But I'm not sure exactly what was allowed to happen.
Yeah.
From what it sounds like, they've even had those moments when they're like having a sit down, doing a restorative conference, things like that. But like when I was meeting with the parent and with the student, as well as every other teacher that he had and admin, he was completely shutting down.
Yeah.
Which was sad, because it's like, we need to address this, or like, let's even just hear your side of it, because all we have is what we have from the write-up from the one teacher, as well as the other many issues that were going on. But it's like, we have no idea to gauge what's going on with him. Parent wasn't aware, because clearly he's shutting down. It sucks, to be honest with you, because you'd like to do something other than send them to an alternative school, because that already has a different connotation. It's a different type of diploma. And it's like you were talking about, you're trying to avoid with your potential dissertation for your PhD, avoiding that dropout to prison pipeline type of thing.
But that's even when you say that, right, Ryan? You weren't aware of what happened freshman year, but I go back to what happened when the kid was 7 years old or 8 years old.
Yeah, that's
right.
True. Even before then.
Yeah, I mean, up to sophomore year. I mean, at sophomore year, these kids are basically like grown ass adults, right? Yeah. Like something had to happen, whether it was in their community, in a school setting. And I understand, like, as teachers, we can't bear that full weight because there is a lot of other things that go on out there. So I'm not saying that we are the end all be all, but I do think it's important for us to do what we can. And, I think community partnerships are really big too with it, understanding the positives that are going on in the neighborhood. I was reflecting on this today when I was watching the news, and they this morning they were talking about how Chicago crime and murders were down for the first time in multiple years. And the superintendent came on and goes, I never would have thought, like, back in the day we would have said Inglewood's leading the way for murder reduction and things of this nature. And it's just a testament, to the police. And yeah, granted, like, I understand that, but what about all these other community organizations that are trying to give these kids important places? What about these policies that teachers are putting in schools that are leading to this too, right? Like, we have such a militant and military like style of justice in this city that, we're stopping the bad guys on the street, but we're not looking at where that kid came from.
Yeah.
And like, is there anything as a sophomore we could do other than throw him out on the street where the cops are then detaining him?
And it's sad too, because it's not just a disciplinary thing. It's also an educational intervention type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, there was an article that came out about my school, and some other schools too, but mine was named in it, talking about how they've thrown all this money into schools like this and they're not seeing any results, even though they were comparing SAT scores from 2007 to 2016, like a completely different group of kids, right? They didn't think, like, not to mention that the school has gone through a lot of changes, like with what it was. But they're not even thinking, like, maybe this is about feeder schools and like younger kids, and not just putting it on, the group of teachers in the building at the current time, right?
or all those schools they shut down a couple years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
That,
right.
like now, yeah,
They just assume,
exactly.
yeah, that's not going to have any adverse effects, that they're driving 45 minutes by bus to get to their school every day.
Right.
Like, Jesus Christ. Anyways. Yeah, that is kind of sad, though, the way that it's almost, I think last week I kind of equated it to like trying to fix a Major League Baseball player's throwing motion. When it's like, you should probably do that when he's like a kid in like Little League, right? But they just don't seem to realize that there are these precursors to what's happening. But that just sucks. It's not lazy, but it's almost, it's lacking that empathy, kind of like you were saying earlier, to actually understand it.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, you know, I remember having that conversation with you, like within the first couple weeks of your career that you started, and where you're just like, I don't know what the hell to do with these kids and their phones. And I think that's a really important thing, right? Like when we were growing up, I mean, there were cell phones and things, but it didn't exist like this is. And do we fight it? Do we embrace it?
Right.
You know, like it's very interesting understanding what we can do without, you know, reinventing the wheel every day.
Yeah. And it's weird too. So like I've used like Pear Deck and Poll Everywhere, things like that. But it's crazy how much like backlash I'll get within my own school being like, well, you allowed them to use their phones for this and now they use it in my class and I don't have it at all. And it's like, they should know better, but now it's becoming like a teacher versus teacher type of thing. It's brutal. The phones will never be solved.
And it's really interesting too that you say that, right? Because we always run into those policies. You know, in my classroom, kids will, you know, I like to have a classroom where kids are comfortable with themselves and it's a safe place for them and they should be able to represent their identity and in a respectful way. But like other teachers will come in, I'll have kids with their hoods up or a hat on or something like, you know, they'll be yelling at the kid, like, take your hat off, take your hat off.
Yeah.
And they're like, but Mr. McCabe lets me have it. I'm like,
and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
No, I do that too, especially because I have a room that gets really cold. And at a certain point, there was a kid that he didn't have a jacket. All he had was a winter hat with like the little bean on top. And I was like, yeah, go ahead if you're freezing. And then I'm pretty sure it wasn't like an official evaluation, but someone walked in and they were like, take that hat off right now. And it's like, oh shit, is this going to look bad on me? But you have to like take a step back and think like, oh, let's think practically. Is the room cold? What's going on here? Is this kid going through something? Like bad hair days. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he would get the bad haircut. Like, they want everybody to see it.
I don't know, that wouldn't have been tolerated when I was in school. They get the damn thing off. There was this one when I was in high school, if you paid like $2, you got like a sticker and you had to put it on your hat and you could wear it for like a couple weeks or something like that. It was like a special limited time type of thing. But
so that's a suburb school.
That is a suburb school. You could tell instantly. Classic right there though. But yeah, no, I agree though. Like the phone thing, it's crazy. Like thinking about like, do you really want to make it that big of a deal? I think that's the biggest difference between some teachers where a student, you know, they get annoyed when they walk in versus they're actually there to learn. And it's typically based on like, are you going to make a big deal about something that seems small to them?
Yeah.
Because it is a changing culture.
I had the other day, because I had to give the Constitution test, which is a whole nother thing, right? But it's state mandated, so we have to. Yeah. So I always give retakes on things, right? Like everybody has a bad test day. And the day after we took it, I was going to give a retake. That following day, I released the scores through the Google form so they could kind of see what they missed, this and the other. So I saw this girl towards the end of class, and it was like the 2 days before break, and she was texting, and I'm just like, oh man, like that's like my one rule, this and the other. So I go up and I'm like, hey, like, who are you texting? She's like, oh, I'm texting, you know, so-and-so, the girl who sits next to her who wasn't in school.
Oh.
So I was like, all right, like, what are you texting about? She's like, you know, her alarm didn't go off. She's really freaked out that you're not going to let her retake. And her grade's going to be stuck the way it is. And I'm just like, you know, at that point, it's kind of like, can you be mad at her for being a good friend in that regards to calm her down? So, you know, I took the girl's phone and I texted because she was like, I don't think he's going to let me retake. And I took her phone and I texted like, probably not. He's a jerk. And she texted back like, yeah, you're right. And I'm just like, oh, I just owe myself for that one.
And you go like, all right, this is actually him. Like, oh,
that's
shit.
what I said. I'm like, by the way, this is. And she's like, no.
That's going to stick with her for the rest of her life.
Exactly. She's like, I actually think you're a really nice guy. I was just agreeing with my friend.
She's like, please let me retake it at this point. Like, after you heard all this. I did that once where there's a kid that like he walked out, and he does it all the time. You don't take it personally, but there's a group of friends, and they always have like Snapchat or something like that. And so I was like, hey, real quick, take a snap of me like doing like a thumbs down, something like that, and then make the caption, come back to class now, unless you want to serve a detention. So I'm sure you loved that. But
that's where I feel like we embrace it, right? Like, you know, the kids live in a digital world now. If we can teach them to have fun with it and use it at the appropriate times,
right,
then why should we just be outlawing it like all the time with that, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
That being said, though, it's kind of, I collect phones for like assessments. We have a lockbox. I put them in there. They're really good. That's like one kid. I was like, "Hey, put your phone in the box." He was like, "What? What's going on?" But he wasn't there. Like,
okay.
When I gave him the warning that it was happening, and as soon as I said, "Oh, it's an assessment," he was like, "Oh, okay, cool, my bad."
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, all right, they're down with that. They get it.
Right.
They understand it. So that's kind of encouraging. But,
yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
Can this be a pause point?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay.
Like
yeah.
let's
pause.
Yeah. Let's do that. All right, so we had to take a quick little break there for refills and stuff like that. You grabbed another? Okay, good. So I wanted to ask, because I think I talked about it on this podcast pretty early on. Do you remember the bird story when I was covering your class when you were out?
I was at like professional development or something.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Did you ever hear from like that sub? Like sometimes they leave notes or anything like that? Oh, my God. That was, I'll bleep out the name, but that was when was going at it with the sub being like, you called us stupid when we were in elementary school, and I went to go make a copy in like the math room that you had down the hall, and then I hear a scream because some kid let a bird and they thought was injured.
You know, it's funny. I have that kid again this year, and that kid, that's one of those kids that like I keep trying to reach, and it's not happening.
Yeah,
like
he was very hit or miss.
He doesn't get it, like, you know, and you know, it's constantly trying to reach him, and I just can't, and like. He's getting like D's and F's in most of his classes, and like parents pulled him out to go do a football tournament or football thing in Florida for a week. And like for a week.
Jesus.
And you know, he came back, he's like, well, what'd I miss? I'm like, you missed the summative. And he's like, oh, can I come in and make it up? I'm like, yeah, you can come in during your lunch and make it up. All right. Hasn't come in yet. And it's been about a month. I keep emailing mom, oh, he'll be in today. I'm like, he's not in today. And he keeps asking, can I come in today? And I'm like, yeah. This is like, this is fourth period and lunch is fifth period. And I'm like, your memory can't be that bad, kid. Like,
oh my God. No, I have a feel like that too. That's incredible though. Oh my God. And they don't even realize like, oh, it's affecting their grade.
Right. And that's the thing too, right? Like circling back, right? Like, we have kids that like are set up against everything, and then we have kids that have like everything.
Yeah,
and
they just don't take.
take up on it, right? Like, so no, it's yeah. I'm on round 2 with that kid. But.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. I remember he was having a good day that day too, and I like didn't even think about it because I was like, oh cool, we're firing on all cylinders. And I step out for 2 seconds to make like 2 copies, and everything goes to shit with the sub.
All hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
There's a bird in the room. Yeah. This year outside one of my rooms, I have a bee's nest. So they a bee gets in, and it's like, you would think it's like freaking Armageddon. They're like screaming and yelling. I'm just like, oh my God.
Oh, that's happened? The bee's gotten in?
Yeah, one bee. And it's just like, are any of you allergic? No. And I'm like, then chill out.
It's gotta be fine. It's gonna be fine. Oh my God. Yeah, that was my first. I remember you were like, hey, can you come in when I'm not here to just like cover the class? And like, here's the lesson plan. It's pretty simple. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I wonder why. Like, I'm sure the sub can handle it.
No.
Oh man, that's when I realized subs in the inner city
are there for a paycheck.
Yeah. They're there to just, I remember once I walked into my department head's room, and it was a sub that I had previously, and there's kids sitting on desks, they're throwing shit, and I was just like, hey, can you guys keep it down? Because my class is doing something. They're on task, and I was like, weren't you the guy that I had? Great. Now I understand why I didn't get a single paper yesterday.
And it's funny, right? Like, my buddy Jeff and I always have this conversation about it, right? Like some subs like go in and, you know, they have really great intentions and things. And we're just kind of like, okay, like we go to the kids like, listen, it's an adult, and it's the most unthankful job in the entire world.
Yeah.
To go in and be a substitute, because they automatically know that you're not going to listen to them.
Yeah.
They know if they get anything out of you, like, they just don't want any hassle from you. Like, and I understand that, right? But like, my buddy Jeff and I had a conversation. I walked into his room, and he had a sub who actually I know through the debate organization. And he was sitting there, and he's on his phone and just, having a good old time, like, backs to the kids. And this is like 8th graders. And you know what? I saw all the kids on their phones, and I knew in Jeff's plans it said, please do not let the kids go on their phones. And, he came in the next day. I'm like, hey, I'm just going to let you know, the kids were on their phones, but so was the sub the entire time. He wasn't even paying attention. He's like, then how can we fault the kids then?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right? Because they're going to model whatever the adult's behavior is. Yeah. So it makes sense. So,
It's kind of, I remember I even took a picture once to be like, look how prepared I am. The first time I prepped for a sub, I had like, like every handout labeled, like, this is for second period, third period, fourth period. Now it's like, here's one handout, here's one thing, just do it for all the classes.
3 sciences, don't let Lord of the Flies happen. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, right? Like, let me come back to like a normal room and like no windows broken, things like that.
Don't let Piggy die.
Oh man, no spoilers on that. But yeah. So I was also, and we kind of talked about when you weird interview questions, which it kind of circles back, because we were also talking about like potentially moving around in the first few years of your career, things like that. What was the interview question?
Oh, it was great. It was like you walk into, it's your first day at school, and you walk into the class you've been assigned to, and there's no desks, and there's no books, and there's no markers and anything. And you have a whole bunch of kids that walk into the room, and it's like, what do you do? And like, I'm sure other teachers would be like, oh, we're going to do some activity to get to know you. I'm like, you go find an empty room with desks in it. It seems like a no-brainer. Well, you were telling me the one, like yes. What do you wear?
They were like, what are you wearing? Like, what color is the tie? Like, what kind of pants? What are you going to wear the day after? And I was like, I don't, another nice shirt? And they were like, good answer. And then they moved on and asked me about differentiation. I was like, what the fuck was in this inside my head? Like, what do they want from me in this interview? It went well though. Like, they asked me to come back, but
you're like, no idea. I got to wait 2 weeks until I get that first paycheck, and then we can talk about having shoes without ties. Holes in it. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Please hire me. But so you started in a school and you were there for like 10 years, and then you moved on.
Yeah.
In terms of like moving around or like finding times to like switch, I know it's tricky in some districts for like the window that you can move, but I had a one teacher that he's been at this school for like a decade or two, something like that. And like my like third week of working there, like I ran into him in like a lounge when I was making copies, and he's like, yeah, you should probably like try to move, like, I'm not trying to discourage you, but you should probably move around before you become too expensive, which was, and like I get it was good advice, like I appreciate it. He and I, like, I think we're pretty close, and I appreciate his realism, but I wasn't sure, because I know you started off and you were in one place for a while, but I mean, you were happy there.
Yeah.
For the most part. that was the most questioned, like, yeah, I think so.
So I took a little bit of a different approach getting into it, because, I started out at IIT like my freshman year in like architecture, and I was like, I don't like architecture. Let me try like materials and metallurgical engineering, and I'm like, it's not working out. And then I definitely spent a little too much time in the party scene rather than the class scene. So,
but you met your wife?
No, that was well after.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah. So, I had to go back, do the community college thing. Took some time off, did an internship with a not-for-profit for kids with disabilities, and then ended up at UIC. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and be a teacher, what I wanted to do in the first place, and stop listening to my parents and things. And so, like I said before, like, there were no jobs. So what happened was I got hired on as a cadre to take over a maternity leave.
Okay.
And then they put me, when she came back, they put me in this room. Oh my God. It was a 6th, 7th, 8th grade bilingual split. And it wasn't even these.
Welcome.
Yeah. These kids weren't even bilingual. I mean, they were, but they weren't. It was this teacher that the principal was just trying to drive out of there. And these kids were the roughest in the school. And, so this teacher took like a 3-week leave. So I was with these kids for 3 weeks, and it was rough to get them to like buy in, but eventually they did, and it was a good group of kids. So they hired me on for that time. But over that course, you know, I think it's interesting what they say, like, oh, like move around a lot, but you become invested in a place you're working. Yeah. And you know, I did classes at U of C for math. I did my master's at IIT. I did my national boards. I did an ELL endorsement. So, you know, I have a master's 45, so I have plenty beyond my bachelor's, but it got to the point where I love those kids. They were the only reason I went to work every day. Yeah. 'Cause they were just great kids. But I remember the time where I decided to leave after that 10 years. And it was around this time it was break, and we went back, and my principal was making it really rough on me that year. It was always really rough. And I still talk to teachers, and it's kind of a thing. And, you know,
like still there and still making it rough on.
Yeah. And it was things like slut shaming the girls, and like, you know, Jesus. Like it, yeah. And like in front of people, and like, inadequate policies, like, oh, you know, if a kid's not at grade level, even if they're special ed, you can't give them higher than a D, and like, you know, really bad policy stuff that was like fought.
Yeah, that seems like borderline unethical right there.
Exactly. But I just remember coming to the point where like I pulled into the parking lot, and I always get to school usually around 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. And I remember just sitting in my car and staring, and I sat there for about 10 minutes and not wanting to go into school. And I'm like, it's time for me to look for a new place. Yeah. And I think ultimately going back to that teacher, like move around a lot and get places before you become expensive and get experience. I don't know if that's the right advice, because I spent 10 years at a place and I put a lot more into myself.
Sure.
And no matter what happened, I was confident with the experience I had and the ability I had, and I would have found a job somewhere. And it's one of those, like, how do I put this without like offending anybody? If you're taking the advice of move around before you become too expensive, then you're probably not doing what you should be doing in the classroom. Yeah. Because if you're doing the right thing, you will find some administrator that will pay for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, like if you even it's your first year or two there, if you produce some sort of change where the environment becomes better, where you would want to stay, then when you do eventually move, so like the situation you were in, when you decided, all right, I want to move, you can say, here's what I was, you know, working toward. These are the reasons that I did want to leave. That way they can see it as, oh, that's that candidate that's going to stand out. Yeah,
and I built a lot at that school. Yeah. Right? I mean, like,
you can be proud of that too.
Yeah. I mean, it was a neighborhood, high Title I school. And like, I built a debate program where I had kids finishing, I had a team finish second in the nation and the team they lost against was Montgomery Bell Academy from Nashville, which is like $30,000 a year. And then to get to that point, they beat Sacred Heart of Chicago, and they beat Harker of California. And like, so I definitely built a resume and things, and especially with my pedagogical knowledge. But that's the thing. Like, I don't think anyone should have to worry about moving around if you have a high passion for what you're doing.
Sure. And
you have a drive to get constantly better at your job. Because if you become stagnant, then you become a dinosaur. Then you become another piece of paper in that stack of resumes.
Yeah.
So
I think my only concern, so like if my principal is there next year and things continue to trend the way they have, I'm going to be confident in saying, I want to come back because I know I can actually have an impact on it.
Yeah.
Whereas if they go with a yes man, we'll see if I keep this part for the episode, but then I'm not sure, you know? Like I was thinking about it in terms of like my sophomores, for example, like I know that I would want to have them next year because they've built those good habits because they weren't there for, you know, what was allowed to happen.
Yeah, you're like freaking freedom rider, man.
Someone used that. They're like, you're the next Hillary Swank right there. But no, I could see that though. It's disconcerting when I know we have pretty low enrollment too, and they're closing schools left and right now. Ever since they took off the whatever the word is for the freeze on that, which is it's disconcerting because I believe they should have school choice. Like that's something parents should be allowed to have. But with all the charter, not to discount charters, I think they have their own mission. They're doing right by students for the most part, from what I can see on the outside. But it concerns me in terms of enrollment.
It's the way they're politically put in to suck away from neighborhood schools.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like I teach in an area where there's been a major proliferation for charter schools. And I agree, like there is a purpose for them. They do serve a specific type of student that needs that. But when it comes to the cost of taking away an option, maybe for students that maybe wouldn't fit into that that charter mold, then it gets a little dicey for me.
So how many kids are driving? By bus, like 45 minutes just to get to the next bus to get to school.
Yeah, and I mean, I might be a little hypocritical with that as well. Teaching at a school where, our high school, does have, I mean, it has a neighborhood aspect where those students get automatic enrollment, but there is a cut score with that, with being
I didn't know that.
It's an IB school, so
that part.
So our high school, so our K to 8 is open enrollment, and we do offer kind of pathways to education where students can apply and get in. But no, I agree. Like it's an issue not just in Chicago, but across the United States, but particularly in Chicago, right? Like they keep saying like we need more selective enrollment schools, we need more IB schools, we need more magnets. Even my brother-in-law the other day, he's like, well, why aren't they building more magnets here? I'm like, how about they just make every school in a neighborhood a great school?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why is it that they're not pumping that schools like have, a classroom size of, 28 to 1, but then you're drawing from the same group of kids everywhere, right? Like it's interesting because schools like the school that you teach at or I teach at, or the school I taught at, or any other school in the city really could like be an adequate school with the type of funding.
Right.
And, sometimes we're like, well, schools that are in these specific neighborhoods, those students are just going to, turn it into what it is. And that's just like these backward racist policies that come out of the city of Chicago.
Yeah. Have you also noticed so we were talking about a particular school that we won't mention, but like the quality of the building too, like that definitely plays into the way students feel when they're in the building, right? And like how they're going to perform or see themselves or how they think others see them. Yeah. Have you like noticed like it getting better so like my building, it feels like it's kind of crumbling in areas. Granted, it's a huge building, but you
walk into the staff bathroom and it was a smoking lounge back in the 40s, right? Like exactly. It still has that distinct smell of cigar.
Yeah. Well, like we also got this notice that we had to give to students. They were like, here, give this to your 7th or 8th period class.
Lead paint,
and it was
asbestos.
It was like, this is to inform you that we have completed the check for asbestos. And I was like, so did we pass? Like they didn't say in the letter. It just said we did the check. That's all
it was like the lead in the water, right? Like
that was the other one.
Your school's free of lead. Like great, I've been working here for 10 years.
And now we find out. Yeah. Oh man.
So, but no, I think it's right? Like I walk into a school we had a debate tournament there and it was on the north side. It's one of the higher ranked schools in the city and the state. And I walk in, it's an older school, but they have a hydroponic lab. They have they have a robotics lab.
Jesus.
And I'm like,
actually, I think we might have that too. Sorry, go ahead. I was like, do we have it? I think we do.
But I mean, it's like full on like, and I'm just kind of walking through and I'm just kind of like, this is really interesting that they have that. And schools that are on the south and west side don't have things like this, right? Like I grew up in the country.